In this practice, we're going to talk through just the best method of choice when solving these problems. So best meaning fastest, the most efficient way to do these. So to start, this is going to be trig versus law of sines and law of cosines. So looking at the first problem, we want to decide what method we should use. Our key should be that there's a right angle. So anytime you see that 90-degree angle, your answer should be trig, meaning we are using SOHCAHTOA. So from here, across the 90 is H, across the angle is O. So I see O and H, which is sine. So it's sine of the angle, which is 59, equals opposite X over hypotenuse 17. To solve this problem, I'm going to multiply both sides by 17. This cancels, and I'm left with 17 times sine of 59 equals X. Since X is now isolated, I can pick up my calculator and type in my trig function. So things to make sure that we do, let me adjust this real quick. Things we want to make sure that we do, we want to make sure that our mode is degree mode. So to check the mode of your calculator, you press mode, arrow down, and degree should be the one highlighted, which it is. So now I can do trig. So 17 sine of 59 gives me an answer of X for 14.6. And you're finished. Like, it's so much faster than law of sines. So recognizing right triangles will help you. Remember, degree mode is the mode for trig. Graphing trig functions, we use radian mode. Okay, next one. I see no 90-degree angle, so trig is out. Remember the difference between the two? The law of sines requires two angles and two sides because it's a proportion, so it has to be even. Well, looking at our problem, I see two angles and two sides, so law of sines is my appropriate method. The way that you set up the law of sines is the 20 corresponds to theta, so this becomes sine of theta over 20. Side of 29 corresponds to 82, so sine of 82 over 29. Now we cross multiply. 29 times sine of theta is just 29 sine theta, and then 20 sine of 82. Remember, our goal whenever we are solving for theta is to get theta isolated. The first way we're going to do that is we're going to divide both sides by 29. I am going to be using my negative trig function in this problem, but I have to wait until I move the 29 first. So now I'm left with sine of theta equals 20 sine of 82 all over 29. To isolate theta, which is again our goal, I have to multiply both sides by the inverse trig function. So when I'm typing this into my calculator, it's going to look like a hot mess, like sine to the -1 and sine go away. And I will write it up here because I ran out of space. Our theta value is going to equal sine to the -1 of all of this stuff over here. 20 times sine of 82 all over 29. Okay. So when I type this into my calculator, I need to make sure that I am doing it correctly. So second sine, 20 sine of 82. Make sure every time you're doing these problems that you're closing that top parenthesis divided by 29, and you get an answer of 43.1. I'll show you what happens if you don't close that parenthesis. So right here, I'll delete it. If I leave it open, and what ends up happening, I get 80. So that one little parenthesis at the top, that makes a huge difference in your problem. So when you're doing these, you want to make sure that you are closing your parenthesis. And now it's not going to pop up. I was trying to find it, so I didn't have to retype it, but I can't, so forget it. Just remember that you want to close that top. All right, next one. I see no 90-degree angle, so trig is out. Then I also see three sides and one angle, which is the requirement for law of cosines. The law of cosines requirement is that you have one angle and you have three sides. So law of sine is out and law of cosine is in. So to set up law of cosine, you find the angle and the side across from it, leaving this as x squared. Then the a and b value are arbitrary, so I'm just going to make this one a, so 9 squared plus 19 squared minus 2 times 9 times 19 times cosine of the angle, which is 97. When you are typing this into the calculator, you're going to have to put these parentheses. It will make your life so much easier if you put those parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Parenthesis 9 squared plus 19 squared minus, open a new set, 2 times 9 times 19 times cosine of 97. Close the trig function, close the pink parenthesis, and we get an answer of 483.6. Now we're not finished with this problem. Remember, we have to isolate by square rooting. So second x squared, second negative sign means square root my previous answer. Press enter, and to round to the nearest tenth, that would give us just an even 22. Next problem, I see no 90-degree angle, which means trig is out. I see two angles and two sides, which means law of cosines is out. So law of sines is my correct method. X corresponds to 61, so sine of 61 over x. 8, however, corresponds to nothingness. But remember, the way that you solve these problems, if it goes to nothing, you add the angles. So 30 plus 61 is 91. And then you take 180 and subtract it from 91, giving you 89. So this 30 has no purpose anymore. So now it's the sine of 89 over 8. And now we can cross multiply. So notice the difference between these two problems. Law of cosine gets 3 sides, law of sine is 2. Cross multiply, I get x times sine of 89 equals 8 times sine of 61. In this problem, I need to isolate my x, so I should be dividing both sides by sine of 89. These cancel, and I'm left with 8 sine of 61 divided by sine of 89. So 8 sine of 61. Make sure that you're closing that parenthesis. That matters. Divided by sine of 89 gives me an answer of 7. Next, I see that 90 degree, which means trig is my answer. Across the 90 is h, across theta is o. O and h is sine. Sine of theta equals opposite 39 over hypotenuse 44. Now in this problem, theta is my unknown, so I have to do the sine to the negative 1 to get them to cancel, the inverse. So theta is going to end up equaling sine to the negative 1 of this fraction, 39 over 44. So in my calculator, I keep forgetting, but there's horrible glare. Second sine, 39 divided by 44. Close parentheses, rounding to the nearest tenth, I get 62.4. You remember, the negative 1 is only used when I am solving for an angle. All right, our next one, I see 2 sides and I see 2 angles, which means a law of sines is my method of choice. So to continue on here, I'm going to set it up. 32 corresponds to 79, so sine of 79 over 32. X corresponds to nothing, but that doesn't mean that it's nothing. Remember, we add our angles and subtract from 180. 45 plus 79 is 124. 180 minus 124 is 56, making our angle 56 and us not using the 45 anymore. So sine of 56 over x. To cross multiply, I get x sine of 79 equals, that 32 should go first. Right out, doesn't want to work. Equals 32 sine of 56. To get x isolated, I should be dividing by the sine of 79 on both sides. These cancel, and now my x variable is isolated. Now I can type in my problem using my calculator. 32 sine, 32 sine of 56. Close this parenthesis, that makes a difference, that matters. Dividing by sine of 79 gives me an answer of 27 even when rounding to the nearest tenth. All right, onwards to the back. On the back, number 7, I see a 90-degree angle, which means trig is my answer. Labeling across the hypotenuse is, or across the 90 is H. Across theta is O. By default, this is A. When I'm trying to decide which trig function to use, I want to look for doubles. So I see an H and an A, which means that's cosine. So cosine of theta equals adjacent 20 over hypotenuse 33. I'm going to use cosine to the negative 1 on this problem because anytime I'm isolating an angle, I use the negative 1. These end up canceling, and I have theta equals cosine to the negative 1 of 20 over 33. In my calculator, I'm going to press second cosine to pull up the negative 1. 20 divided by 33 gives me an answer of theta being 52.7. Number 8, again, I see a 90-degree angle, which means trig is the way to go. So to do this problem, across the 90 is H, across the angle is O. So again, sine. So sine of 60 equals x over 17. Multiplying both sides by 17, I always want to clear the fraction. So I get 17 sine of 60 equals x. X is now isolated, which means I can type it straight in. 17 sine of 60. And that gives me an x value of 14.7 when rounded to the nearest tenth. Number 9, I see 2 angles and 2 sides, which means that is a law of sines. Across the 19 is the angle of 85, so this is sine of 85 over 19. The angle across 15 is theta, so sine of theta equals 15. Cross multiplying here, I'm going to have 15 sine of 85 equals 19 sine of theta. Remember, our goal is to isolate theta, which means I need to divide both sides by 19. So I'm going to just kind of flip this. So sine of theta equals 15 sine of 85 over 19. I'll be multiplying both sides by sine to the negative 1. So that means that these cancel and theta is alone. So I can now type into my calculator sine to the negative 1. And then all of this is in the parentheses. 15 sine of 85, making sure that you close that parenthesis, divided by 19, gives me an answer of 51.56 when rounded to the nearest tenth, gives me an answer of 51.9 for theta. Number 10, this is a law of cosines problem. I should be able to recognize that it has one angle and 3 sides. So across that angle is x, making that the c value. So x squared equals 7 squared plus 9 squared minus 2 times 7 times 9 times cosine of 35. Remember, the a and b value are arbitrary. It does not matter which one you put first or second. When you're typing this into the calculator, make sure that you are putting the parentheses in the appropriate spots. So I'm going to do parentheses 7 squared plus 9 squared. Oops. There we go. 7 squared plus 9 squared minus, open a new set, 2 times 7 times 9 times cosine of 35. Close the cosine, close the pink parenthesis. In this problem, we get x squared equals 26.7. Remember, you must square root. So second x squared, second negative. And I get 5.2 as my x value when rounding to the nearest tenth. Next, number 11, I see a 90 degree, which means I have to use trig. Across the 90 is H, across the angle is O. By default, this is A. I cannot use H because there's nothing with it, so I'll have to use tangent, opposite and adjacent. So this is tangent of 40 equals opposite x over adjacent 20. I always multiply both sides by the denominator to clear the fraction. So 20 times tangent of 40 equals x. X is now isolated, which means I can type it into my calculator. So 20 tangent of 40 is 16.8 for my x value. And for the very last one, I see 3 sides and 1 angle. By default, that is law of cosines. So across the angle, that's my C value. So I get x squared, and I'm going to make 15a and 11b. That equals 15 squared plus 11 squared minus 2 times 15 times 11 times cosine of 116. Remember, when you're typing it into the calculator, you should put the first group in parentheses and the last group. So to type that in, I'm going to do parenthesis 15 squared plus 11 squared, close parenthesis, minus in between, then 2 times 15 times 11 times cosine of 116. Close the trig function, close the pink parenthesis. This gives us an answer of x squared equaling 490.6. Remember, I must square root, so second square root, second answer gives me a value of x for 22.1.